Okay, welcome everybody to the last session of day one of Dreamforce 09. Please, if you haven't yet taken a seat, find a seat. There are plenty of seats up front. Don't be shy. We're all friends. Come sit up front if you want to. It's obviously better or easier to see the screens, these great rear projection screens if you're sitting up front, so do so if that makes you feel more comfortable. This is, again, the last session for day one of Dreamforce. People having a good Dreamforce so far? I hear mumblings. I hear see even a kind of half-hearted applause there. That's sort of a good start. What do you guys think about chatter? What's the chatter on chatter? Is it chattery? Is it chatty chatter on chatter? I think it's pretty cool, actually. I'm particularly impressed with the ability for apps to speak to users. I know it sounds kind of corny, but I actually think this is pretty interesting because, we here at Salesforce in our training insert department, we actually use Salesforce to manage our training insert business. And I can tell you, for one, that having chatter, having the ability to have our apps talk to us without having to receive email every time, which is the bane of everybody's existence, right? Email, way too much email in our lives these days. Having chatter, having the ability for an app to actually speak to you, I think is very useful. So I'm actually very excited about that. So I would like to first introduce you to my esteemed driver. His name is Jim Martucci. He is a veteran of many Salesforce Dreamforces. He's going to be driving for me. I also want to introduce you to our helpers. We have some helpers. Helpers, can you please raise your hands? Raise your hands and keep them up high in the back there. There are our helpers. And they're going to help you out. That's what their job is to do. They're going to help you out if you run into some trouble in the exercises that we're going to do in the next 60 minutes here, which reminds me I have to do this real quick. Where is it? So what we're going to do is talk about automating your Service Cloud using some very interesting out-of-the-box functionality. My name is Chris Piper. I am in the Education Services Group. I am a practice manager, and I am certified as an administrator and as a consultant. I want to talk to you about our Safe Harbor Statement. Anybody here not seen the Safe Harbor Statement yet? That's right. We've all seen that, haven't we? So we all have an idea of what it means. What I've often wanted to do is record instructors explaining the Safe Harbor Statement and see how many different kinds of explanations we can get. Here's mine. My explanation is that our lawyers here at Salesforce.com force me to tell you that any business or technological decisions that you make must be on current, not future functionality. That's our Safe Harbor Statement in essence. If you're curious about the fine print, so well put together up here on this slide, go to Salesforce.com and do a keyword search for Safe Harbor, and you can read the Safe Harbor Statement print as fine as it gets to your heart's content. As with all of these hands-on training sessions, this one includes the ability for you to go hands-on. That's why we call them hands-on training sessions. So in order to do that, you need to log in to the training org that we've made available for you for these exercises that we're going to do. Notice there's a naming convention that you'll want to follow when you log into the training org. Obviously, launch a browser. I'm partial to Firefox, but we all know that Salesforce works with all the big ones. Go ahead and find a browser there on your computer and go ahead and launch it. Should bring you up to that Salesforce.com customer login screen. Once you find that screen, log in. The username follows this convention, admin at df09, that's a 0, and then automating, and then the 3-digit number that should be on the upper right-hand corner of your monitor. .com. The password today for everyone is password 1. So that's the lowercase word password and the number 1, no spaces. Anybody not able to log in? Anybody not able to log into their training org? Wow, good. Okay. So the agenda for the next 60 or so minutes is to talk to you in an overview sense about what we call the Service Cloud, or more particularly the Service Cloud 2, as was introduced by folks this morning in the keynote. We're going to look at some tools that you can use to automate support because, as you should probably know, it's all the name of the game in support to be able to automate as much as you can, right? Because you have a lot of cases coming in. You have a lot of your customers who are trying to contact you through various means, right? Through email, through the web, over the phone, sometimes via Twitter, sometimes via Facebook, sometimes actually in person and over the counter, like if it's a bank or an insurance company or those kinds of things. And so cases come in a multitude of ways, and there's a lot of them that tend to come in depending on the company and the products that we're supporting. So you need to automate the ways by which cases are captured and assigned to your agents to work. Or in some cases, they're not going to assign cases to agents. You're going to assign cases to queues, right? We have this concept in Salesforce called a queue, kind of a holding tank, where cases go and agents can review those cases and they can grab the cases that they need to work, when they can do that. So we're going to talk about a lot of these ways that you can automate the process by which cases, regardless of where they come in, are assigned. And then the other thing we're going to talk about is case escalation. So in a support environment, in a call center, in a services organization, you often are bound to what are called SLAs. And SLAs stand for service level agreements, right? And these are contracts that companies enter into with their customers to adhere to a certain level of support, right? It's a certain quality that they have to meet. And if the SLA is not met, is broken, then the company can be liable in some cases. So we have to make sure that we're within those SLAs. And a big way that we stay in SLAs is through what's called escalation. So, for instance, if a case is not addressed by an agent, if it's not reviewed, if it's not solved, if somebody hasn't done any work on the case in, say, 24 hours, we need to escalate that case. So we're going to look again at how we can automate the processes by which we escalate cases, move them through the support management process. And then we're also going to look at a way by which we can hopefully automate through some of the self-learning functionality that we have. One of the great things about the Salesforce platform is the ease with which you can automate functionality to allow your customers to support themselves or to interact with a support agent without having to talk on the phone. What's the problem with talking on the phone? Don't we all like to talk on the phone? Isn't talking on the phone the great way of communicating? Well, yes, but the problem with talking on the phone is it's expensive, right? And so support organizations are always trying to drive down costs. So we have some really interesting functionality that we can learn about, and we're going to actually practice a bit with right now that allows us to automate some of the ways by which you can interact with your customers, keep up with what's going on with them, keep a case moving through the case management process, but not have to take that very expensive route of a phone call. And then if there's time at the end of this session, this actually is the last session of the day, so we have a little bit of extra time. It's not so jam-packed like it has been for the sessions earlier today. We have a little time for Q&A. I'll definitely want to take some questions. I also want to draw your attention to that microphone. There's a couple of ways we can take questions. Try not to shout them out at me. Try to approach the mic, or sometimes one of our helpers will have a mic. They can run over to you, give you the mic. You can ask me a question. So that's what we're going to do. A lot of fun stuff. You saw this slide this morning. Our chairman and CEO, Mark Benioff, actually explained this slide. I'll reiterate it quickly for those who weren't at the keynote this morning. We have this notion now called the Service Cloud 2. And in essence, what the Service Cloud 2 allows us to do is leverage the social graph, right? So we know that these days, a support organization is not a great way of being able to capture and handle all the problems that customers experience with our products and services. These days, customers more frequently go to Google or go through Twitter or go through Facebook, these other ways by which they can submit questions, I got a problem with my whatever, and can leverage resources out there on the web that aren't connected with the companies that support or produce the products to get answers to their questions. Well, the Service Cloud 2's mission is to try to bring some of that social graph revolution that's happened into a Salesforce org. So through call center, through email, through chat, through this thing called the customer portal, through communities, through partners, through Google search, through social applications and platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and others. And the others is, blogs and listservs and little websites that people put up who sort of are experts at a given product or a given company's things. We've all seen these, right? We've all had the experience of a problem with a product, not getting the kind of support we need from that company, right, from the tech support rep at the company, and having to go outside the company. Well, the idea behind the Service Cloud 2 is to leverage that. And so over time, our company's ability to support its products and services increases and improves pretty dramatically by bringing all of this knowledge floating out there in the internet into our support organization. And that's essentially what we're trying to do with the Service Cloud. And it's a very revolutionary idea. I can tell you from personal experience, I have spent some time in a call center. I have done my time on the phones, and I know how frustrating that can be for a customer who comes to you with a problem and you have absolutely no idea how to solve that problem. The reason is, that a given call center is only ever going to see a certain range of cases. It's usually a pretty limited range of cases, and it's usually pretty basic stuff. A lot of times the more advanced stuff tends to float outside of the call center, and I experienced that myself. So with the Service Cloud 2, hopefully, we'll be able to leverage the social graph in our own support organization. What are we going to talk about in this class? Well, we're going to talk about some ways that you can automate some of the functionality around some of the processes in a support organization. So we're going to look at 3 basic sets of functionality. We're going to look at assignment rules, a way by which you can automate the assigning of a case to a queue or a support agent. We're going to look at escalation rules, again, a way by which you can automate a case that gets escalated. We'll talk about what that means particularly. And then workflow, which is a very general Salesforce functionality that we're going to look at in the specific context of a support organization. So let's take a look at assignment rules first. Assignment rules are ways when a case is created where automation is run on the record itself. And you can see here through this diagram on the right-hand side of this slide that the case can go either to a queue, can actually go to a team. There's this concept now of case teams. You see this more and more in support organizations where maybe a tier 1 agent, a tier 2 agent, and maybe a developer, or maybe a SME, we have this term called SME. A lot of acronyms, right? The SME, the subject matter expert, right? We like these acronyms. We like our TLAs, right? We like our 3-letter acronyms. Hey, we can have a tier 1 agent, we can have a tier 2 agent, we could have a SME of some kind on a case team that would all work a case, and that case would be automatically assigned to those teams based on case criteria. There are multiple rule entries that can define the conditions under which the case is assigned, the order in which these fire. So one will fire first, and then they'll fire in order down to the very last one that you've defined. And then we look at these for actually only assigning cases, not for anything else. Escalation works very similarly. So one of the nice things about the Salesforce platform is, and I particularly like this, once you learn how one set of functionality works, it's very similar to how lots of other kinds of functionality works, with just a couple of twists. So you'll see when we go through these exercises that learning how the assignment rules functionality works gets you about 85% of the way to understanding how escalation rules functionality works. Very nice how we leverage that. With escalation, you have a case that already exists, and you have a time component that you're going to attach to that case. We call it an age over. So a case comes in, it meets certain criteria. We'll see what these criteria are when we set up some of these escalation rules. So it meets some of these criteria, and a clock will start to tick. And that clock will continue to tick, and based on how we've set this up, the clock will run out after a certain time. So maybe if a case isn't closed, a case isn't addressed, like a comment isn't added to a case, a key field on the case isn't updated, whatever it is, however we set it up, it's up to us to figure out what that process is. If that happens, the clock runs out, the case is escalated. What do I mean when I say escalated? Well, we'll talk about what that means particularly. And when you escalate a case, you can escalate it out to another user, specific user, another agent, like a tier 2 agent or a tier 3 agent, or however you set that up. You could escalate it to another queue, which is a very common way that we handle escalation. A lot of times, if a case needs to be escalated to satisfy a SLA, it'll go out to a Tier 2 queue, and the Tier 2 agents will have access to that queue, and they'll see that a case is in that queue, they'll pull it off that queue, and they'll work it as a Tier 2 agent. Very common support organization structure. So when you escalate a case, there are a few things you can do. You can notify via email a user. You can say to the person who is getting the case, right, the new agent, that you've just been assigned a new case. You can tell the person who you're taking the case away from that the case has been taken away from them. And this can be very important because a lot of performance metrics in call centers are built around the number of cases that a given agent closes in a given period of time. So this can be a very important notification for a given agent. And then you can literally reassign the case. So in Salesforce, we have this notion of a record, a case, being owned by something. It could be owned by a user, that's the support agent. It could be owned by a queue. When you escalate a case, you're literally changing the owner of that case. You're reassigning that case to either another agent or to another queue. We'll see how this works when we set all this stuff up. Workflow is another really nice set of out-of-the-box functionality that you can configure right through the UI, right through the user interface, that allows you to do all kinds of interesting things. It allows you to automate many aspects of your business processes that you have in a company. So you can automate aspects of your lead assignment process, your lead qualification process. You can automate aspects of your sales processes, be they how deals are assigned or worked through a sales cycle. And as we're going to see, you can automate parts of a support process. So there are many things you can do with workflow. You can do things like automatically send out an email alert to somebody if a case meets certain criteria. Alert somebody that they need to take a look at a case, say, or that some key field on a case has been updated. You can actually update a field automatically as a result of a workflow rule. So this is a really good way of ensuring data quality. A lot of times as administrators, we struggle with this notion of data quality in an org, right? Users don't enter data in fields that they should. They enter the wrong data. Sometimes it's their fault, sometimes it's our fault. I don't want to get into who's at fault here. I want to try to make this as automated as possible. So field updates give you the ability to automatically update fields if certain criteria are met. You can send outbound messages. So this is really good for integration purposes. If you need to send a message via the XML format out of an org into some other system, you can do that using an outbound message. And lastly, you can select an existing action, which is to leverage an action that you've already created for a particular workflow. So you can recycle actions for various workflow rules. So enough talking. Let's get into an exercise. Let's see how we would set up some of this automation here. So what we're going to do in this exercise, and just so you guys know, you all have, I want to grab this for a second here. You all have an exercise guide. Everybody should have an exercise guide. Anybody not have an exercise guide, raise their hand, and one of the helpers will be able to get you an exercise guide. So if you don't have an exercise guide, raise your hand. For the rest of you who do, we're going to go through a couple of exercises here. And I'm going to try to keep you on track with where we are in the exercise guide. It's pretty self-explanatory. Now, I will say here that people learn differently. You know, we here in training sort of are very interested in different learning styles and how people learn. Some people like to watch me and watch Jim. Other people just like to go power through the exercises themselves. You can do whatever's most comfortable for you. We give you different ways to do this. So what we need to do here is to create a case assignment rule. AW, that means AW is actually a fictitious company that we work with a lot in our training classes. AW Computing is kind of like Dell. They sell computers and they sell peripherals and they sell consulting and they sell support and those kinds of things. AW Computing wants to assign cases to a specific queue based on the account rating. So at AW, we rate accounts. They can be hot accounts, they can be warm accounts, and they can be cold accounts. What makes a hot, warm, or cold account? It doesn't really matter. But there's a criteria that we have at AW that determines that. If the case coming in is attached to a hot account, then we want it to go to the gold queue. That's a hot account. That's a strategic account. I want it to go to the gold queue. If it's a warm account, it'll go to the platinum queue. And if it's a cold account, it'll go to the silver queue. I want to be able to automate this, right? I don't want to have to manually assign these cases to the queues every time they come in. So the things that we're going to do here are we're going to create the rule, we're going to create some rule entries, and then we're going to take it a step further. We're going to actually test it out so you can see how a new case gets automatically assigned to a queue. Ready? Excited? A little scared maybe? Don't be scared. It's pretty easy. Okay, so Jim has now switched over to the training org that we're all using. Here you have your handy-dandy home page. We all should be very familiar with, and almost too familiar maybe with that home page. So what we're going to do here is we're going to click on the setup link. That takes us to the administration sidebar. So Jim is clicking on that, and you'll see this critical updates pop up. What we want you to do here is click no. I don't want to view the critical updates now, and I want you to uncheck the remind me again in a week checkbox. Okay, so hey, we're looking at the admin sidebar here. We're now going to go into our app setup area, and we're going to go into customize. So expand that customize area, and we're going to go down to the cases area. We're going to be working with the cases object, right? These are the things that records are created from cases. So expand that cases area. Here are all the things that you can do with the cases object. We're going to focus on assignment rules. So find that assignment rules link there and go ahead and click on it. We're going to set up an assignment rule. So you see a big button that says new. I bet you want to click on it, right? Go ahead. I'm giving you permission. Click on that new button. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create, or you're going to give this assignment rule a name. And we're going to call this the hot account rule. Now notice that you have actually assignment rule. Jim is into revision there. So we're going to do the hot account assignment rule. And again, all this is on this exercise guide if you just want to follow along with that. Now notice that we have a checkbox here. Set this as the active case assignment rule. Okay, as administrators, we know that there are rules that we have to deal with when we're working with this functionality. So I got a rule for you to deal with. Ready? In an org, you can only have one of these assignment rules active at any one time. So you can set up multiple rules, but only one of these rules can be active at any one time. And hopefully, for those of you in the room who are already certified administrators, you know this already, because this is one of these basic pieces of administrator knowledge. So once you've done that, click on the Save button, and now we've got a rule. Are we done? We're just getting started. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to click into the rule. Notice how Jim finds the name of the rule. That's a link. He's going to click into the name of the rule. And here we see a new screen where we have what are called entries. So here's another rule for you. You get one active assignment rule per org. You get 3,000 entries per rule. One rule, 3,000 entries. So hopefully, and I have yet to meet an org that can do this, hopefully within those 3,000 entries, you'll be able to set up all the different assignment rules that you need, or the assignment entries that you need. So we're going to create a new entry. So we're going to click on that new button, create a new entry. Now here's where all the fun happens. We first define the sort order. So like I said before, these fire in order, 1 to 3,000 theoretically, right? So you need to define the sort order here. You need to define which of these fires first and in the middle and then last. And that's an important thing to know because the way this functionality works, the first time a case meets the criteria, it's going to be assigned. So it goes tick, 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 tick. Oh, it meets the criteria here, gets assigned. And this is unlike other platforms where all rules are evaluated simultaneously against a case. We don't do that. We go tick, 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 tick. First one that we see that meets the criteria, we assign it. So what you want to do to accommodate that is the more general rules are going to be up front. The ones with more criteria, the more specific, back up. Whatever, if you're writing stuff down, cross it out. The more specific are going to be up top, the ones with more criteria, and the more general are at the bottom. Think of an inverted pyramid where the number of criteria are more at the top and less till we get to the very bottom. That way, no rule gets misassigned, and no case gets misassigned, and no case goes without being assigned at all. So when you're designing this, and this is important stuff to design, it's good administrator stuff to think about. And we talk a lot about this in our administrator workshops, where we go into a lot of the details around how we set this stuff up. So there's our sort order. Next thing we're going to do is define how the case will be, or under what criteria the case will be assigned. So make sure you select criteria are met. And then we're going to choose which field. So notice here that Jim is going to select this pick list, and oh my goodness, is there a lot of values there. So the thing to bear in mind here is that the criteria can come from the case, can come from the related contact. Notice all those contact fields. It can even come from the account. So in this case, the criteria are going to be for the account rating field. So notice how Jim is selecting that rating field. In this case, the case comes in, the case is attached to a contact, the contact is attached to an account. The account field is what will assign the case. Not a field on the case itself, but on a related record. So and here the rating will equal, and then notice that you have this little lookup here. That means that's because rating is a pick list. So when it comes to pick lists, you can actually just select from the values on that pick list to assign the case. So here we'll say that if the rating is hot, go ahead and select that checkbox, click on the Insert Selected button. Now we know under what criteria the case will be assigned. All right, good. Who's it get assigned to? Well, notice that in step 3, you have the choice between users or queues. So we're going to select queues. And here we're going to make sure we select the gold queue. Now look, Jim is just going to select the lookup field, and he's just going to choose from the 3 queues that are set up. In reality, you're going to have way more queues than 3. We've really drastically oversimplified this for training purposes. In reality, you're going to have probably, I don't know, at least 10, sometimes even more queues. But whatever it is, you choose the queue. So Jim has chosen the gold queue there. Now, a couple of other things here to talk about before we move off this screen. Notice that you have an email template field. You could, if you wanted to, send an email to all members of the queue that a new case has gone into that queue. And this can be really, really interesting, no, not interesting, it's more than that, really vital functionality. But be careful. Why do I say be careful? Well, if the queue has a lot of members, and if there are a lot of cases being assigned to that queue, you're going to get a lot of email going out to a lot of people throughout the day, and that's not good. We all know what happens when people get lots and lots of email. They tend to ignore it, right? And that's not what we as administrators want. We want people to pay attention to the email that is related to the queue. So bear in mind, it's good functionality, but it has some limitations that you should think about. Here is where, if you wanted to, you could assign a case to a case team. Now, we don't go over case teams in this class, but it's a fairly standard concept, and the functionality is fairly easy to set up. If you wanted the case to go directly to a team, it could be because it's a strategic account, it could be a strategic product, could be a strategic geography. However you guys have defined it, you may want that case to go to a team instead of a queue or to a user, and you have that choice. Okay, so once you've done all that, click on the Save button, or actually we're going to click on the Save and New button. Click on Save and New, and we've created our first entry. You have up to 2,999 more if you want to do that, but we're just going to do 2 more to get you a feel for how this works. So the second one we're going to do is going to be evaluated number 2. So you put a 2 in there, and once again, you're going to have the run this rule if the following criteria are met, and we're going to go once again to the field here, and we're going to once again find the account field called rating, which is right there. And this time, we're going to say if the rating equals, and then we're going to hit our pick list here, warm, then what's the queue that we assign it to? You guys tell me. Platinum queue, right? We're going to go to that platinum queue. AW uses the precious metals support terminology. So that's the platinum queue. Again, there's the email, there are the case teams. We're going to do this one more time. So click Save and New. And this next one will be evaluated number 3. And once again, we're going to go down to field, and we're going to say if the rating field here is equal to cold, go to the silver. All right, so we got our 3. And again, I've drastically oversimplified this, but our job here in Training Insert is to teach you about the functionality. We unfortunately aren't in the business of figuring out exactly how you should set it up. That's the job of you guys, or maybe a consultant if you're working with one. So we've set our 3 entries up. We click on the Save button, and here they are. 1 rule, 3 entries. 1 rule, 3 entries. You can change the order here if you want. And is there a question? Good. I can't hear the... Oh, in the book? Okay, so there looks like there's a bit of a error in the exercise guide. This is your source of truth right here. Do what it says, what Jim has done. Jim is my source of truth, so this is your source of truth right here. So 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, anybody still working on this? All right. So the next thing we're going to do is test it out. So to test it out, notice how Jim is already up there at the Cases tab. I think Jim wants dinner. I think he's ready to go home. So Jim is already up there at the Cases tab. So you guys likewise go to your Cases tab. Click on that Cases tab and then click New to create a new case. So our contact name here is, and I just blanked on our contact name, so Jim's going to write it in for me. Our contact name is Soprano. Oh, that's cute. Soprano. Okay. So we click on the Go button, and we have Brent Soprano, and the account is American Bank. So go ahead and click on the Brent Soprano. That should bring up that information there. Now notice that I have nothing to do with silver accounts here on the case, but it's what? It's the related record that's going to drive the assignment of this case. I think the subject here, we'll fill out the subject field. I think it has something to do with printer problem. Not exactly sure what it is. And we're going to define the case origin as phone. And I don't think we need to worry about any of those other fields, except there's a really important one at the bottom. Notice down here in the optional section, there's a checkbox that says, assign using active assignment rule. Now this is how, out of the box, through the UI, you leverage this assignment rules functionality. Now you may say to yourselves, well, that's dumb. I don't want to make my end user check that box every time. Well, there's other ways around this. And if you take any of our administrator workshops, we show you there's a little bit more sophisticated ways of automating how cases get assigned so that the end user doesn't have to click on this checkbox every time. But for us right now, we're just going to check on this checkbox. So you've done that. Click on the Save button. And, uh-oh, what happened? Where was that supposed to go, and where did it actually go? What were we expecting to have happen there? What were we expecting to have happen? Let's see. Where do we want it to go? Silver queue, where did it go? It got assigned to a specific user, so we need to troubleshoot. One of the things that we do as administrators is we troubleshoot. So we're going to check out here. We're going to take a look at the account, take a look at the American Bank account, and the owner of the American Bank account is Phil Smith. Notice there is nothing in the rating field. Data quality strikes again. Nothing in the rating field. So there's a couple of, there's some other functionality whereby if nothing is in the rating field, there's a default user that cases get assigned to. Who's that default user? Roberta Spada, right? So what we're going to do now is make sure that we can find an account that is actually defined as, or we can actually define American Bank as silver. So once you go find the American Bank account, define it as cold, and then click on the Save button, and we'll go down and create a new case. We can actually do it from the Cases tab here. So click on that Cases tab again, click on the New button. Once again, your contact name, you should be able to put it the same, Soprano. And there he is, Brent Soprano. And the case origin here will be phone, and you can put in something in the subject like yet another printer problem or something. And there you go. And make sure you scroll down, check that, click on the Save button, and now it's in the silver queue. Okay. Makes sense? Pretty easy. Question? So the question is, can I edit an existing case and leverage that assignment rules functionality, that checkbox, right? So Jim, to answer your question, click on the Edit button, scroll down, and notice that you still have that checkbox there. So you can if you want to. So if you forget to do it, you can go back in and check that checkbox. Okay, good. So let's move on and see what other functionality we can work with here. So the next exercise we're going to do has to do with escalation, which has to do with the meeting of adhering to these SLAs. I think what I'll do is for the rest of our exercises that we're going to do, I'm going to hold questions, maybe save them till the end. Save a little bit of time. We're actually doing fine, but any other questions you might have, hold them till the end and we can take them all as one group. So here we're going to use some very similar functionality, but not for assigning cases, not for the case assignment part of our process, but instead for the case escalation or part of the case management and case resolution process. In our workshops, we talk a lot about case processes, and we break them into basically three parts: case assignment, case management, and case resolution, right? Assigning the cases to the right agents or queues, managing the case, working the case through the different status values that might be on a case, and then resolving cases, right? What do we do when we close a case? Different companies have different ways of defining a closed case and different things that have to happen, either automated or manual, when a case gets closed. So in our workshops, we actually talk a lot about those processes that we support through a Salesforce org. So what we're going to do for this exercise is create an escalation rule. The scenario is AW provides 3 service level agreements, 3 SLAs, a silver level, a gold level, and a platinum level, more precious metals. I'm not sure why AW is hung up on precious metals, but it seems to be that way. They want to make sure that any case entered into the system is appropriately escalated to meet these SLAs. So we're going to create an escalation rule, and then we're going to create some rule entries. Unfortunately, we cannot test escalation rules unless you guys want to wait until tomorrow afternoon to see what an escalated case looks like. If you do, I'm sure we could get sleeping bags in here and you can hang out a little bit. Tons of food. But we're not going to be able to test this out, but you will see how it's set up. So let's go back into the org that we've been working with here. And once again, we're going to go to that setup link. Going to go back to the app setup area, into customize, back into cases. Here we're going to go to escalation rules. So click into that. And what you're going to notice is, hey, things look really similar. So the escalation rules functionality is very similar with some important differences to the assignment rules functionality, which is, again, like I said, one of the things I really like about Salesforce is that you learn it once and you know it in lots of different places. Okay, click on the New button. And we're going to give this rule a name, and Jim's going to type in here standard escalation rule. Or maybe not, just standard escalation. And just like we saw before, we're going to make this the active escalation rule. And once you've done all that good stuff, click Save. And then, like I showed you before, you click into the rule. And we're going to set up some entries here. So we're going to create 3 entries just like we did before. So click on that New button. And it's just in case you're curious, the 3,000 works here too, right? 1 escalation rule, 3,000 entries per rule. Okay, so the sort order here will be 1. Make sure you select field criteria, or sorry, the following criteria are met. And here we're going to say if the account support level, and again, it's a field not on the case, yeah, but on a related record, equals, and we'll start with platinum here this time. If it equals platinum, then who does it get escalated to? Well, first of all, we got to understand this notion of business hours. So when we're, I told you about this notion of a clock, right? So with escalation, clocks tick. That's important. But you don't want a clock to be always ticking, like a dumb clock, to not be sensitive to anything else. So Salesforce has this really nice business hours functionality, so that, let's say your SLA says that any case coming in a support level has to be somehow addressed in 24 hours, right? And let's say that case comes in Friday at 3 p.m. You don't want that case to escalate Saturday at 3 p.m. because no one's around, right? So what we have in a Salesforce platform is the notion of business hours. So for each of these entries that you set up, you can either ignore business hours, so the clock ticks regardless of what? The hour of the day or the day of the week, or whether or not it's a holiday or any of that stuff. It just ticks. Or you can use the business hours that are specified on a specific case, which you may want to do, or you can use a set of business hours that you define. And this would be a set of business hours that would be subject to all cases, right, for this particular entry. So there's a lot of different choices that you have here that you can make to handle when and for how long that clock ticks. So we're going to use the business hours specified on the case. So make sure you select that middle radio button. Now here we have the kind of clock. So there are different kinds of clocks that you can set. And we want to talk a little bit about the kinds of clocks that you can set. Based on when the case is first created means that the case comes in, meets certain criteria, could be on the case, could be on the contact, could be on the account. Clock starts to tick. Clock continues to tick until either the case is closed or the case escalates. That's the first clock. Case closed or escalated. That's the only things that can stop the clock, if this is the kind of clock you're setting. Middle, case based on when the case is created and disabled after case is first modified. This is what we call the disable after first touch. So in a lot of support organizations, the SLA stipulates that all you got to do is something on the case. The SLA says all I got to do is have an agent look at the case, make a change to a field. Oh, and by the way, sending an email out from a case doesn't stop the clock. None of that related stuff that you can do on a case will stop the clock. You got to go in and you got to modify a field on the case record. That'll stop the clock. That's the second kind of clock you can set. Third one is based on the last modification time. So this is the one that's very popular. Case comes in, clock starts to tick. Yeah? Somebody modifies a field on the case. Clock resets, starts to tick again. Somebody else comes in, modifies a field on the case. Clock resets. And this kind of continues to happen. The clock will be reset and start ticking all over again until either the case is closed or the case is escalated. So you have three kinds of clocks for each entry. Think about that. 3,000 entries, three kinds of clocks for each entry. Whether or not each entry is subject to business hours or not, and different criteria. So a lot of granularity here. Hopefully should cover pretty much every business case or use case that you'll have. So once we've done all of that, we've defined our clocks, we've defined the age, or we defined the kind of clock. We're going to click on the Save button. But we're not done. With escalation rules, we got some more things to do here. What we haven't done yet is two things. We haven't defined how long the clock's going to tick for. We haven't defined that for this entry. And the last thing, we haven't defined what's going to happen if the clock runs out, right? What's going to happen? What's that escalation thing that's going to happen? Those are handled in what's called an escalation action. And if you're into numbers, you have 5 escalation actions per entry. So to review, you got 1 rule, you got 3,000 entries, you got 5 actions per entry. So have fun and go nuts with all of that stuff, right? So we're going to define an escalation action. So click on that new button. And here we're going to put in this age over. This is this notion of how long the clock ticks. And for silver folks, it's going to, or for platinum folks, it's going to be, I think, 36 or 24. It's going to be 24. I notice that's in hours, not minutes, hours. So that's how long the clock ticks. The next 2 steps on this screen define what escalation is, right? So I was like, what is escalation? Well, escalation is very specific on a Salesforce org. Escalation means, in this case, we'll reassign the case. So choose Q here. And then we're going to find that silver queue, or sorry, platinum queue. Thank you, Jim. And then again, you can notify somebody that the case has been reassigned via email. And this uses our standard Salesforce email template functionality. Very, easy stuff to set up. And you can notify folks. So we're not going to do that here, but just so you know, this step 3 allows you to notify not just the folks in the queue, but you can notify other people as well. Notice that you can notify the case owner by clicking on that checkbox. You can notify some other user. And you could even CC up to 5 additional email addresses. So you can really, really take advantage of the kind of communication that may need to happen when a case is escalated. Maybe one of those email addresses is the AE on the account. Maybe it's a support manager. Who knows who it is? But you have a lot of latitude there. So once you've done all of that, click on the Save button. Now we're going to set up a couple more of these escalation actions. So click on that New button one more time. I'm going to create 2 more here. The next one is going to be for our gold customers. So once that comes up, coming up. Oh, we got to go, sorry, my bad. We got to go back to the rule, and I got to set up another entry. So go back to the rule. Did you see how Jim clicked back into the rule there? Did you guys see that? No? Jim, why don't you get him back to the rule here? Once you get back to the rule, there's the, are you back at the standard escalation rule? Anybody not at the standard escalation rule? Anybody lost? Not at the, okay, good. Okay, so we're back at the rule. We're going to create another entry. So click on New. And this will be number 2. And again, we're going to drop down to the field area there. And we're going to define if the account support level equals, in this case, we'll drop down to the next precious metal, which is gold. And click Insert Selected. And we'll go on down and leave all this stuff the same here. Click Save. That's our second entry. How about our second escalation action? So we're going to click New for the escalation action. And the age over here is, I can't remember what it is for this particular one, 16 hours. Sorry? Oh, okay. How about we do platinum, gold, and silver? Okay, we'll come back and do silver later. So we have 16 hours as the age over here, and then we'll go down and we'll say, hey, if 16 hours elapse for this particular case, then who's it going to go to? It's going to go to gold. All right, and then if we want to, we could notify folks as well. We can notify users and all those other folks. So go ahead and click on the Save button, and that's your second entry and your second escalation action. Now, everybody watch what Jim is doing here. Everybody watch this. See how he clicks into the link here? So click in the link, and that takes you back to the rule. Okay, don't get lost. Takes you back to the rule. So now that you're in the rule again, we're going to do one more entry escalation action combo. So click New one more time. And this will be number 3. And here we'll say if the account rating or support level equals, and now we'll go down to silver. We'll leave all that stuff the same. Click Save. And our escalation action here, once again, we'll click on the New button. And this will be 8 hours. And again, we'll reassign it to a silver queue. And you can see how it works now, right? It becomes fairly repetitious here after 1 or 2 or 3 or a few more of these, right? Hopefully you see how some of the concepts here operate and how some of this basic UI functionality hopefully will help you automate some of these processes. Okay, so there you go. There's your escalation rule. There are your 3 entries and 1 escalation action per entry. Unfortunately, we can't. Hey, Jim, just quickly, I want to show them what an escalated case looks like. So click on that Cases tab. And click into any case. I don't care. Any case. Just go into one. So, hey, what does an escalated case look like? Does it dance? Does it move around? Does it jiggle? Is there like a fire coming out of it? No. Basically, an escalated case, right next to the number of the case. So if you go up to the top of the case, there's a little red arrow that points up. That's it. Little red arrow that points up. It's kind of anticlimactic. I was hoping for more when I first learned this functionality, but I didn't get a lot. But the good thing about this, behind the scenes, there's another field called escalated. It's a checkbox. And that escalated checkbox actually automatically gets selected as well. And that's really important from the standpoint of workflow and reporting, so that you can very easily report on escalated cases, put escalated cases into a dashboard, create list views for escalated cases, and automate other kinds of workflow actions around the escalated case. So that, unfortunately, I can't show you. If I could draw on that on the screen, I would. But I'm not. Just imagine a big red arrow that points up. Okay, great. So that's exercise number 2. I think we're going to move on to one more exercise here. This is where we're going to leverage some workflow functionality. And like I said before, workflow is a very general set of functionality that you can use throughout a Salesforce org. But we're going to look at it in the context of automating support processes. So we need to create a workflow rule that will reopen a case once a customer has entered a comment. So oftentimes, if you're interacting with your customers through this self-knowledge or self-learning functionality, there's a lot of it that we offer in Salesforce. We offer something called the self-service portal. Some of you may be familiar with it. That's kind of an out-of-the-box free tool that you can use to interact with your customers over the internet. We have what's called the customer portal, which is a little bit more sophisticated, but much more expensive tool that you can use. I'm actually going to be running a class on Friday on how to set up your customer portal, so I'm going to plug myself. That's kind of lame. But I'm going to, tell you that on Friday, if you're interested in setting up a customer portal, I'll walk you through a session on how to do that. And then we have other things too. A lot of this Service Cloud 2 stuff is really around the self-learning or self-knowledge aspect of support. It's very popular these days. It didn't used to be all that popular because people would, try to take advantage of this self-learning functionality. And I think we've all seen that, right? We've all experienced self-learning. It's very kind of problematic until one company came along and really kind of found the missing link in self-learning. That company that came along was Google, right? When you have a problem with a Google product, there are no tech support agents for you to interact with. There's only a lot of really good self-learning functionality. So Google has come along, and in addition to many other things that they've revolutionized self-learning as a support tool, as a working and successful support tool. So now, a lot of companies are taking a second look at self-learning. And we see at Salesforce that there's a lot of new interest in and new success with self-learning. So we think that if you take a look at some of our self-learning tools, you might be successful as well. For this exercise, when a case is set to awaiting customer response, the customer logs on to the customer portal and adds a comment to the case. So let me set this up a little bit. Assuming that you have a customer portal, a support agent may be working a case, and that support agent may not have enough information to continue working that case. It's very common. I need more information from the customer. I myself see this a lot when I'm interacting with agents. They need more information from me. So what the agent can do is flip a switch on the case record and say, this case needs more information for me to be able to continue working on it. And what you can do through the customer portal is alert your customer in various ways. The most common is email, but there's other ways too. Alert your customer that they need to do more on this case for the agent to continue the case management resolution process. And that's what we're doing at AW. They're using the customer portal, and they have this switch, awaiting customer response. So what we want to do is be able to continue working the case as soon as that customer makes a comment to the case, right? So I want to be able to use workflow so that I'm automatically alerted to the fact that a customer has made a comment, has added additional information to the case, so I, the agent, have to go in and see if I now have enough information to close the case. So we're going to see how much of this we can automate. So let's flip back over to the org here. And we're going to play with workflow a little bit. So we're going to once again click on Setup. And we're going to go a little bit different area here. So minimize, customize. Minimize, customize. Go to Create. And then you're going to go down here to Workflow and Approvals. and you're going to select workflow rules. We're going to set up a workflow rule. This is some of the most popular functionality that administrators have access to, right? I see the head nodding there. Your head is nodding. It's very useful. I see even the thumbs up. People loves the workflow. It's good stuff. It's good to learn about what workflow is all about and what it does. Okay, so once you see that splash screen, click on the Continue button. And there's one rule that's already in there. We're going to create a new one. So click on that New Rule button. The first thing we do is we select the object that a workflow rule will operate on. Lots of different objects that we can have workflow operate on. We're going to select case comment. Select case comment. And then once you've done that, click Next. Now, like we see with so much of this admin functionality, we're going to give this rule a name. And I think we have this customer response received. And then we'll put in a description. I think there's a lot of text you can, in your exercise guide, there's a whole paragraph's worth of text if you want to put all that in there. Yeah, then that's what Jim is going to do instead. So you can do that if you want. I don't want to give this short shrift. I think the description field is important. You know, many of us who are in this room and who are administrators aren't going to be administrators forever. We're going to go on and do other things, and other folks will come in after us and support a Salesforce. So we're going to make sure that we fill this field out so that folks coming behind us know what this stuff is all about. So once we've done all that, we're going to talk about the evaluation criteria. Oh my goodness. We can talk forever about evaluation criteria, but to basically sum it up, there are 3 different ways that a rule will evaluate a record in order to see if it meets the trigger criteria. And the 3 ways are when a record is created, so every time a new record is created, or when the record is edited, existing record, user comes in, makes a change, and did not previously meet the rule criteria. That's very important. That's the most common and most popular kind of trigger that we have. And there's 2 others. Only when the record is created, so that's only the first time the record is created, this rule will operate on that record. And the last one is every time a record is created or edited, whether or not it met previously or did not previously meet the trigger criteria. So when you're setting this rule up, when you're looking at this functionality, pay very close attention to the kind of trigger you define. It makes a big difference in how the rules operate. We're going to select the top one there. Now we're going to set up the criteria. So see this functionality very similar to what we saw when we looked at escalation rules and we looked at assignment rules. So here once again we're going to say that if the field, I'm going to find the field on the case there, and the field we're going to look at here is kind of a special one. Comment. So notice here it says case comment published. This is kind of a yes, no, on, off switch. Equals, then we're going to take a look at that pick list, true. So what's happening here is there's a field that kind of works behind the scenes. You don't necessarily see it as an end user or as an admin. But if a user goes in and makes a change to that common area of a case through the self-service portal or through the customer portal, that'll flag that as some change has been made to that. So that's going to set all this workflow functionality off for us. So make sure that you say case comment published equals true. That's going to be your criteria. Go ahead and click Save and Next. And we're going to set up some actions here. We're going to set up 2 actions. And they're both going to be immediate actions. And the first action is going to be a field update. Automatically update a field based on the action or based on the criteria. So the name of this action will be update the status. And notice that when Jim hits the tab key, the unique name is automatically populated. So we're going to next put in a description here, and you can put in whatever suits you. And then we're going to decide which field we're going to operate on. In this case, we're going to hit that pick list, and we're going to select case comment. I guess case, okay? So actually, the field update is the status field. Now we're going to just say, hey, what value do I want to define that field as? So notice that you have a couple of options here. the value above, the value below, or you can set it to a specific value, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to set it to the value working. So that means that a case that was closed, if a user goes in through the customer portal and makes a comment, that opens the case back up. And you know, that can be really important, right? That means that an agent has to actually get back on that case again and start to work it again. So we click on the Save button. We're going to do one more action here. So we're going to add a second workflow action. And this one will be an email alert. So you put in a description here for the email alert. And this will be the kind of communication that our customers receive. And once again, we get that tab key, and we'll get a unique name, and we can select a template that will control the kind of communication that goes. So there should be a folder that you can choose. Support templates will be the folder. Go ahead and choose that. And the specific one will be response received. That's the template that will control the communication. Who's going to get this email? Well, right now, nobody. But we're going to define who's going to get this. So notice these are all the different entities that can receive this email. It can go out to lots of different folks. So we're going to select role. Which role is it going to be? Well, we're going to go U.S. call center agent. So everybody in that role will receive. That means that more than one user will be alerted to the fact that this case is now working again. So maybe more than one person can, or the first person who gets it can grab it, or however the process has been worked out. Okay, so once we've done all that, we click on the Save button and click on the Done button. And lastly, we click on the Activate button. Now, unfortunately, unlike the second exercise, I don't have the ability to test this out because we don't have access to the customer portal through this org. So you're just going to have to imagine in your minds, your fertile imaginative minds, somebody going to the customer portal, working on a case, changing or adding a comment and having that alert an agent that there's been a change made to a case, so they have to work it again. This is how it's set up for the administrator. So there you go. If this is interesting, this is good stuff, think you may want to learn more about how workflow works and in general how administrator functionality works, hey, myself and Mr. Martucci and other, how do I say this? I'll say highly trained instructors here at Salesforce.com run administrator workshops, and they are 4 days, and they're all around the world. And if you're interested in signing up for them, you can actually, there's a link on your desktop of your computer, and you can click on that link, and you can sign up right now for a class if you want. You can also visit our Training and Cert folks in the Training and Certification booth in the expo, and you can talk lots more to them about signing up for one of these classes. And then, lastly, I want to thank you guys for attending, sticking around late in the day on day one of our Dreamforce 09. I want to call out Tyler. Tyler, raise your hand. Tyler is our training expert. If you need to talk to somebody about signing up for a class, Tyler is your man. He's got his nice black jacket there, and he's ready to help out. And then one last thing before you leave, there's a little survey that we'd like for you to complete, which lets us know how we're doing. It's very important to us. So if you go back into your training org, you go back to the Home tab, you scroll down, you'll see an area there called Course Survey. If you click into that, then you select the class, and the class that you just completed is Automating Your Service Cloud, right there. Jim just selected it. And then there's a few other little, questions that you can answer. So I want to thank you guys very much for sticking around late. And if there are questions, please raise your hands. And the helpers will, Phil Donahue style, run around with the mic. There is our Phil Donahue. Hi, Phil Donahue. And they will run around with our mic and allow you to ask your question. So keep your hands raised. You got a question? Raise your hand. You got a question? Raise your hand. I see 3, 4 hands. Whoa, 5 hands. Oh my goodness, run, run, run.
The workflow functionality, I work in Professional Edition. Is it true that that doesn't exist in Professional?
Right, so the question, just to repeat it, is does the workflow functionality work in Professional Edition? And the answer is not out of the box, but you can purchase it as an add-on.
Okay. Anything else that we've covered that would fall into that category as well?
Assignment rules is included in Professional, and escalation rules is included in Professional.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Can a workflow rule be created so that when a case comment is entered, the last modified date of the case is updated?
Absolutely. So that's a field that is just a basic standard field on the case object. And if that's modified, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can just say if it's changed, you use a formula actually. So you would instead of just the criteria being met, you would use a formula. And the formula is a special function that we have called isChange. It's kind of like an Excel function. And so it looks at the record, and if the last modified is changed, you'd use that not previous trigger, then it would fire off whatever actions you define.
It's the opposite. So if a case comment is entered,
Yeah.
then the last modified date changes.
So would it be both or just one?
No, just so right now, if I entered a case comment, even in this, the last modified date doesn't change. Is there a way through workflow to make that happen?
I think so. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure you would be able to do that, yeah. Any other question? Back row.
Yeah, regarding the case teams, is it possible to track the individual's time for each member of the case team?
Very good question. So the question is, for case teams, is it possible to track the individual time? And the answer out of the box is unfortunately no. There's no way to do that. You'd have to build a separate something, I'm not sure. I know there are a few AppExchange add-ins that do include a kind of a clock, a rudimentary notion of a clock. That's a very common use case and a very common request that we have. And so my answer, unfortunately, out of the box is no, I don't have the ability to do that.
So on the workflows, when you are changing a status from a new to working or updated, the user that made that, from a reporting perspective, the user that made that change, would that be the system admin or would that be the owner of that case? So what does the workflow say?
So the workflow says, okay, so the question is, who is changing? So in the status, if the status goes from new to working, let's say.
From an auditing perspective of changing a status on a case, for us it's very important to know who changed that status in case when a workflow automatically changes it based on a condition.
Yeah.
Who's assigned to that log? Is it the system admin or the owner of the case?
It wouldn't be the system administrator. It would be the owner of the case. So whoever the owner of the case is.
So the workflow operates based on, as the owner of the case.
As the owner of the case, exactly. One more, I think I got one more question. I actually have all night, you know. I'll stick around till the Black Crows start if that's what we need to do. So I have another question over here. Oh, actually, another question over here. Go ahead.
For assignment rules,
Yes.
can you assign based on a value? So if support is Premier, then assign it to the value in the account manager field rather than pick a specific user.
So if support equals, so help me with a little bit more information.
So if they have a Premier support contract,
Okay.
we would want to assign it to whoever was the account manager for that particular account.
The top manager for that account.
Right. So rather than saying if it's Premier or if it's this customer, assign it to this user, I want to say if it's a Premier account, assign it to whoever is assigned that account.
I see what you're saying, right? So it's more dynamic, right? It wouldn't be a static. It wouldn't be applied statically.
Right. I wouldn't want
so
to
we
have to go
look
in.
at it would look at whoever that is, and then that becomes the new owner. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to have to go in and assign if it's Citigroup,
Yeah.
assign it to this user.
Right.
I would want to say if it's a Premier account,
Right.
assign it to whoever is the account
And
manager.
you just put your head on you've just touched on a big limitation in that assignment functionality. So the answer out of the box is no, you can't do that. It's all static values. But you can use Apex to do that. So if you learn a bit about how Apex works, you can create a very simple trigger that when the record is created, and if the assignment checkbox is checked either manually or automatically, the Apex trigger looks at whatever that field is that you were talking about, the owner of whatever that is, and assigns it based on that. So the straight answer is no, but yes if you use Apex. Okay? Okay. Question over here?
Actually, I have the question on the business hours.
Yes.
In our environment, like the case object is used by multiple groups
Okay.
in different time zones,
Okay.
like in within US, but in East and West, the support teams, like one support team or the queue is in
Right.
entirely in East,
Kind of a follow the sun model.
and another one is in the West. So
Right.
the one that I'm responsible, that is in the East.
Right.
So if I put a support, business hours for East, will that somehow conflict with those who are using the case tool in West?
No, they should be compatible. What you want to think about doing is a series of escalation rules that reassign the case. So for instance, if you're doing follow the sun and the case comes in and the business hours that are in, let's say, the Eastern time zone elapse and the case is not closed, it escalates, which means it's reassigned to another queue. And that'll start another clock because you will be, the owner will change and that new escalation entry will start a new clock. And that'll continue to tick. And if the case is closed during that call center's business hours, great, right? It's closed. If not, it'll then go on to another, there'll be another queue, usually is what it is. Sometimes it's a user, but it's usually a queue that it's then escalated to, which is your next call center, wherever the business hours are next. And you can continue that pretty much, until you've satisfied whatever the requirement
Or
is.
I can limit it in one, like, if I want to, the way I want, like, if the case is open using this record type, then that will be always in Eastern
Time zone, let's say.
Eastern time.
Yeah,
zone.
right.
So my main point is, once the separate groups are working as a silo, then nobody is controlling anyone. Like
Oh.
in one unit, case system is used by one business unit. This is controlled by their administrator, and the same case object we're using in another business unit is controlled by, say, for me. by
So the way to think about it is cases are users. Can the unit or the person be defined as a Salesforce user or a queue?
That is another problem that I had. Previously I had a queue, and with the assignment rule, case was automatically assigning to the queue. But I was having issue, once the case is assigned to the queue and queue has specific members, they have rights to see or edit. So as soon as the rules triggers, user was getting an error message, something like you do not have privilege to blah, 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 but case was getting open and it was assigned to the right queue. So I was not able to find the solution once I deactivate that assignment rule, and based on these support settings, like here is one option, like automated case owner
Right.
user. I just managed one to administrators.
Okay.
Now that problem solved. I don't know why. When case was created and assigned it to the queue, user was getting that error message. There was only another way I was able to solve it, like by going to the securities, give that in the case object view, something like view all. Like,
Okay, so it's an access problem. It sounds
access.
like.
If I give them view all, then that rule works based on that assignment rule based on the queue.
Yeah. Okay.
But if I unselect that, that means I don't want the user to see all cases open in the queue, then it doesn't work.
Interesting. Well, it's a pretty specific case. We'd probably want to look at that as a specific, almost a troubleshooting issue.
Working actually with Premier support team
Yeah,
to
okay.
find it out
Yeah.
why.
Right.
Like,
Don't know a whole lot about the specific case. Would probably have to look at it.
it's not the specific case.
Well,
it's
no,
like,
your company's specific case.
Yes, I mean, like it is
right.
happening.
Not a specific case record.
No.
Okay, so there's nobody left. Wow. I wanted to thank everybody who was helping me out today, but everybody's gone. So I'm just going to turn off my mic and say thanks to you. You're still. Oh, you have another question? I'm going to take this last question offline. So thanks everybody who's still here for still being here, and hopefully we'll see each other again at another hands-on training session. So have a good evening.